Hello, once again, everybody, and welcome to Broadway Comedy Club Radio. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, right here in New York City, joined as always by the legendary booker and owner of Broadway Comedy Club, currently on a semi-retirement vacation in undisclosed location in Florida. Please welcome back my co-host and dear friend, Al Martin. Al, how are you?
Hey, how you doing,
Good.
Clayton? Excited to be on my semi-retirement, I suppose. Not my doing, just talk to Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio.
Yeah, well, yeah, Al, I wanted to ask you, they put Save the Stages into the new bill that recently started with the coronavirus relief. What does this mean for the club? Do you think we'll be back up and running soon?
Well, listen, I'm excited about it, but based on some of the other things in this package, I expect out of the $15 billion that's slated for Save the Stages, that they will be saving stages in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Croatia. Nothing to do with American stages, I don't think. No. Yeah, it's good news. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
But whether it gets us open, honestly, I don't think we're opening till May or June, and that's more a result of how quickly we can get the vaccinations out and how effective these vaccinations are. And now we suddenly are hearing about an English strain. How rude of the English to send us an English strain of coronavirus.
Maybe they just wanted to steal China's thunder. Well, Al, we're gonna keep...
What I quickly don't understand is that when President Trump said the virus was from China and he wanted to cut, all flights coming in from China, he was called racist. But now Governor Cuomo is forcing the British to make sure that they get vaccinations or else they can't come into New York State. So I don't understand what the difference was.
No one really does, but this isn't really a political show, so let's move on to our guest. We're going to continue our streak, Al. It seems like lately, most of the guests we've had have these beautiful Italian last names, and our guest today is someone that you're very close to. So why don't you go ahead and do the honors of introducing yet another Italian-American to the program.
Yes, okay. Well, this is only because I recently found out through Ancestry.com I'm 24% Italian.
No surprise.
So I have to make up for lost time with my paisans, you know what I mean?
Beautiful.
And especially a fellow Brooklynite. This guy is very talented. I met him through his wife, actually, a few years ago, who's a stand-up comic as well. And a very talented singer, a chanteuse, which I did not know. He's had some very interesting film projects. And we got to talking because he took an interest in my book, did it on a dare. And we're going to we've decided to turn that into something special. And without any further ado, let him talk a little bit about it for Joe Benedetto.
All right, Joe, welcome. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you, Clayton. Al, an honor to be here. I just want to touch on a couple of things you guys spoke about. The British strain is obviously their revenge for 1776. They're finally getting this back. Or 1812. No one really knows who won that war. And as far as you being Italian, I'd like to know exactly which 24% of you is Italian. I'm just kidding.
Well, hide the sausage. That's all I can say.
That was a good. Okay. That's, by the way, we'll get to that. But that title is not what everyone thinks it is. But
okay.
But I'm happy that title precedes me quite often.
Quite a few people I talk to. Actually, one of our guests, Clayton, recent guest Joe D'Onofrio, has been in a Joe Benedetto film. Correct, Joe?
Correct. So Joe D'Onofrio, who is an immensely talented actor, most people would know him. He played the young Tommy, the young Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. And I cast him as the lead role in my 23-minute black and white film noir, Hide the Sausage, which, as we referenced, the title obviously opens people's eyes, perhaps for the wrong reasons, but that was the point because it got attention. And he plays Eddie the Sausage Zambri, who is this low-level criminal. When the film begins, he gets out of prison. He'd been away for a few years upstate. He gets out, and everyone's after him for various reasons. He's not a good guy. And he has different parties out to get him. He owes money to people. People are out for revenge. His own daughter won't speak to him. So he's got to kind of lay low, hence the title, Hide the Sausage. So, and Joe is a tremendous actor, not just from what he can do in his versatility with comedy and drama. He's just a pleasure on set. His work ethic, he brings good energy. He's always the first one on set, the last one to leave. So that was a really great experience working with Joe, and I would do it anytime. So, and I recommend anyone out there to hire Joe D'Onofrio. He's a great actor. So yeah, that film was really, I had always wanted to do a black and white movie, and I'm not Woody Allen, or I'm not the old Woody Allen, let's say. Being Woody Allen today wouldn't really get me anywhere. I'm not Woody Allen in his prime where I could just say, hey, I'm going to make a black and white movie and people will throw money at me. So I had to do it small and not do it as a feature, but as a short film. So that was my first ever black and white film. And it was a crime movie, did really well on the festival circuit, won a bunch of awards, and actually was acquired by Shorts TV, Shorts International, which is a rarity because most people never sell short films. But we sold it for distribution, and it got, which Shorts International was actually the distributor of all the Oscar-nominated short films. Every year when the short films are nominated for the Oscar, they acquire them, bundle them up, and actually put them in theaters. So that was a great honor. That movie was a great experience. And my wife, Maxine, who was my fiance at the time, and as you mentioned, is a stand-up comedian and really even a better singer than she is a comedian, although she might get mad that I just said she's better at something than being a comedian. She sings in the movie as a nightclub singer.
No, so she also does great voices.
She does.
Clayton, you know Maxine Gordon?
Sure I do, yeah.
Clayton?
She's super talented. Yeah.
I have her do voices around the house all the time, especially during the quarantine. I won't go there exactly when, but I have her, do a lot of different characters. You gotta have some variety. I mean, we've been locked up for 9 months. Am I right?
I do. Listen, I do Rodney Dangerfield, and I'm permitted to do it anywhere by my wife, except in the bedroom. She does not allow me to do Rodney in bed.
Well, as Rodney said,
Al, it's already it's already hard enough to get respect in the bedroom. That's hard enough.
As you know, as Rodney said, steak and sex, I have them both the same, very rare. Rodney just you go on and younger. I mean, Clayton's a kid. Clayton, do you remember when Rodney was in his prime? You were too young.
Not really, but I mean, I was of course familiar with him, and I've seen movies like Caddyshack or whatever.
Back to School.
I was doing quite a bit of performing at Dangerfield's Comedy Club, which maybe some of our listeners might not even know doesn't exist anymore. It's I guess you would call it a casualty of the pandemic. So we'll see. I imagine there will be many more. Kind of depending on whether our hashtag save the stages ends up saving any of the stages or not, but it's already too late for Dangerfields, and a lot of other comedy clubs around New York City are being, rumored to be kind of, in dire straits. So we shall see. Al tells us we're going to be fine. Broadway will survive this as long as it doesn't last 3 more years. So hopefully that's off the table, right?
Yeah. What I was going to say about Rodney is you go on YouTube, and when Rodney was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, where he would do how many minutes, he would kill as a stand-up. But it was funny when he would sit down with Johnny and just it's like he has Johnny like in stitches, and it's the funniest stuff imaginable that you'll ever see on broadcast TV. I mean, he was just obviously,
The two guys that always had Rodney in stitches were Don Rickles and Rodney Dangerfield.
Right, Johnny. Yeah.
Two incredibly funny people.
A lot of great clips. Yeah, a lot of great clips with Rickles and Burt Reynolds on the Tonight Show in the '70s with Johnny. A lot of good stuff with Rickles
Yeah.
was a giant.
And if we have any 23 and 24-year-old young comedians watching the show, it's called history. History. Learn your history if
right.
you're going to be a comedian. I don't want to ever hear you tell me you don't know who Don Rickles or Rodney Dangerfield is. Don't be a moron. Learn a little bit.
It's the same thing with the movie business. When I work with young actors or just people on the crew, you if you reference an old movie, and when I say an old movie, to them it's something before like 1990, but you realize, these movies are available everywhere to be seen anywhere. So there's no such thing as something being before I was born. The old joke is World War II was before I was born, but I know about it. So,
70s, I used to, when I was like 18 or 17 years, 16, I used to love to watch the Bowery Boys, which were made in the 30s.
Late 30s, yeah.
And Costello, all that stuff. And it was history.
Abbott and Costello used to be on. Remember, they would show the movies every Sunday morning at like 9:30 in the morning. They would Channel 11. They would show an Abbott and Costello movie every Sunday.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. I mean, all these things. Nobody bothers learning about it anymore.
Yeah.
History.
Before you guys start standing on the front lawn telling all the little kids to get off your lawn, let's talk about Joe. How did you end up meeting Maxine? I'm kind of interested in that because a lot of comedians have kind of interesting stories about how they met their future spouses. Okay,
this will be the first time I ever speak about this publicly.
Cool.
So we didn't meet. It'll be a little sad, a little bit of a downer at first. So basically, my mom had just died, and I was taking care of my mom who had Alzheimer's disease for 5 or 6 years, and she passed away. And I was very much in the doldrums and really wasn't looking for a relationship yet. But I wanted to actually, I needed something else in my life almost to take care of another human. So I thought, now this is the first time I'm telling this publicly, and Maxine, I don't think she'll mind. Because it's actually a really good story about just how random life is and how by a split second you could just miss somebody and never meet them. So what happened was I was thinking about, at that point, not being in a relationship yet. I was thinking about being a parent, but I didn't want to be in a relationship. I just wanted to be a parent. So I found this site. It was actually, there was a site called, I hope I get it right because I'm plugging them. I don't even know if they still exist. I think it was called Family by Design. And for some reason, I had heard about them on Channel 2 News years earlier and wrote them down as something that I thought would be a good idea for a movie. And the idea is people meet on there not to date or hook up or get married. They meet on there to have a kid and stay separate lives and raise the kid and not have to be, So I thought that was a good idea for a movie. But I went on that site. And by the way, I've never done any online dating. I just was kind of, and by the way, if I'm not condemning it, if it's for you, that's great. I just didn't like the exposing the whole information on the internet, whatever. So I never gave information on a website in my life. I get on this site and it's like, 60 pages of filling out shit, like you got to give everything about your whole, and I'm like, I don't want, I was so fucking lazy at this. So by the way, am I allowed to curse?
Oh, Clayton likes to keep it clean for
all right,
ratings,
okay.
But that's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I go on this site and it's, I have to fill out, 60 panels of information. I'm this close to giving up. For those who can't see at home on the podcast, I just held my finger like an inch apart. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do this. So then I finally just decide, I put all my info on there. I put a couple of pictures on there and I upload it. The site, and I told Maxine, the site seemed like it was an abandoned amusement park. There was like 4 people. There were 4 profiles like on the whole site. That's how obscure it was. And I found Maxine on there and we ended up exchanging emails about, we're both looking for the same thing. And then we did phone calls, then we did Skype, and then we met. And again, neither of us at this point are looking for a relationship, but quickly we kind of forgot about the co-parenting thing and ended up in a relationship. And so that the rest is history. We met on this very bizarre site, under different circumstances. And we always think back about how we were that close to never meeting because and the other thing is when I set the profile up, like a day later, I was thinking, I'm going to leave this up one more day and just take this down because I'm a little creeped out by this whole thing. I don't, probably the women that are going to be contacting me on here are catfishing. Is that what it's called? Is that what the kids call it? They're probably not real people. They're Russian bots, whatever. So I have to get off here. And then I met Maxine. And then quickly, as soon as we got in contact with each other, I did rip my profile down. So that's how we met on that site. And the rest is history.
Wow.
Go now.
No, I was just going to say, amazing how, if you had waited one more day, you wouldn't have met your wife, and you wouldn't have met me, and we wouldn't have been able to work on this project together. And, it's just funny how timing is everything, and just little forks in our road, little forks, like one day, 24-hour fork would have made such a big difference.
It would have made such a difference that I would not be here right now with Clayton. I mean, that's how big it was.
Right.
So that's
Maxine
obviously how
introduces you. Yeah, so
Al.
Maxine introduces you to Al.
We meet. Yeah, we met.
Al introduced you.
Good, Clayton. I'm sorry. So what happened was, Maxine introduced.
Al introduced you to me.
Right. Yeah, and God knows who you might introduce me to in the near future.
Well, it's that 6 degrees of separation, right?
Yeah.
It's like this 6 degrees of separation. Clayton Fletcher and James Gandolfini. Clayton Fletcher now knows Joe Benedetto. Joe Benedetto worked on a film with a lot of the cast members of James Gandolfini.
Yeah, Sarah Q.
And Sarah Q. So I want to know a little bit about that movie. I mean, you've got Tony Sirico, Vincent Pastore, again, Joe D'Onofrio, William DeMay, all these guys.
Federico, who was Furio.
Federico, who played Furio. So a lot of the Soprano crew wound up in this movie. Tell us a little bit about how that all happened.
Okay, so that happened when, and this is actually goes to what we're saying. Joe D'Onofrio was kind of responsible for me getting that gig. What happened was, Hide the Sausage started to premiere at film festivals in 2016, and the late director John Gallagher, who literally just passed away in late October of this year, was friends with Joe D'Onofrio from long before I knew Joey. He knew him from the 90s, and John Gallagher knew that Joey had just worked with me on Hide the Sausage. John had seen Hide the Sausage. I knew John very peripherally. We had spoken. We had met once, but we were not. I wouldn't say we were friends. We were not. We knew who each other were, and so he knew how to reach out to get to me. But he spoke to Joe first, from what I understand. He called up Joe D'Onofrio and said, "What was it like working with Joe Benedetto?" And obviously, God bless Joe D'Onofrio. He must have said good things about me. I get a call out of the blue on a Saturday morning in the summer, probably June or July of 2016. And it was John Gallagher, and he's, small talk, talking about he said he saw Hide the Sausage, liked it, and he said, I have this idea for this movie called Sarah. He said, it's about a girl that goes to this acting school, and he had a lot of experiences teaching at such schools. She comes to New York. He's like, I have the beginning, I have the ending. I don't really know where to go with this. He's like, do you want to write this movie? Like, we'll be co-writers on it. He's like, he's going to direct it, and I'm like, sure, we talk about it. And he says to me, one of the first things he said to me, interestingly enough, was, because he knew Tony Sirico and Vincent Pastore before The Sopranos, on a really good movie. If you guys have never seen it, if your audience has never seen this movie, you should seek it out. A movie called The Deli, which I believe came out in 98 or 99. And Sirico and Pastore are in that movie, pre-Sopranos, and John Gallagher wrote and directed it. So when I agreed to do the movie at this point called Sarah, it's not yet called Sarah Q at that time, he told me before I started writing the script, he said, Sirico and Pastore have to be in it, because there was friends, it's a low budget, he wants to have some names. I'm like, okay. I said, I'm not writing them role, they're not playing gangsters in this. I'm like, that's all they ever play now. He's like, they'll love that. And I said, I'll make them I don't know what they're going to be, but they're not going to be gangsters. They're not going to be mobsters. No mafia stuff in this movie. And John was all on board with that. So he let me do my thing. And the movie ended up shooting in 2018. It's actually now out. After John passed, it's posthumously released after he died. He didn't get to see it released. And Vinny and Tony are in that movie as roommates, these two creepy guys living together. That's all I'm going to say. It's not what you think, though, and they would get mad if you thought that. But they're really the funniest thing. Burt Young's in the movie also.
Yeah.
It's great. It was an honor to have the legendary Burt Young say lines of dialogue. Because really DeMeo's in there. Because for me as a kid, when I saw the first Rocky movie, which for all of us was not just inspirational from a life standpoint, but for me, just as a movie fan, I saw the first Rocky in theaters, I don't know how many times. And it's mind blowing that, I'm a kid watching Burt Young in that movie, never dreaming I would one day write a script, write a character that Burt Young would play. So, and Federico also is interesting too, is in Syracuse. He plays an acting teacher, again, completely opposite of the way you're used to seeing all of them on The Sopranos. So I think a lot of Sopranos fans will like just to see the part of the group back together, even though they're not obviously playing the characters you know them for. So that was how that movie came about.
What a lot of people don't know is that both Sirico and Vincent Pastore also were in the same movie, different scenes, obviously, than Joseph D'Onofrio on Goodfellas.
Correct. That's correct. Yep.
I remember briefly seeing Vincent Pastore in the scene where they were taking out fur coats, I think, from a restaurant. And then the second scene, I think I saw him in the back of a garbage truck, dismembered. Was he in that scene? One of those also, or
I'm not sure if he was one of the people when they play Layla when everyone is turning up dead.
I mean, that's an incredible talent, being able to write stuff for people that are usually typecast in one genre and then bringing them back in another. I think that's great. But that's been something in your career. You kind of worked all sorts of projects. Now, the next thing that comes to in front of me on this is your amazing work on Amazing.
Right. So that's the dream. Yeah, that's going to be a big one. So that was, again, it was not the randomness of life, but I got a phone call. First of all, preface this, and Al, obviously I know you're a Yankee fan, but you already know this about me. I was the biggest I was born a New York Mets fan. Okay. So as long as I can remember being alive at age, 2.5, 3, I was a Mets fan. And when I was a kid, I knew the whole, I'm talking about when I'm 4 years old, I knew the Mets roster with their uniform numbers. I could give you the whole roster. So I was a big Met fan. My father was a really good amateur baseball player, left-handed pitcher from upstate New York, who could have been a professional baseball player, but he chose to he volunteered to go into the United States Army and stayed there for 13 years.
Wow.
So I was a big baseball fan as a kid, a big Mets fan. I got a call, again, randomly, from Brad Wyman, who is a very prolific producer, who produced the movie Monster, in which Charlize Theron won the Academy Award. He produced Men at Work and I'm forgetting the other movie, 2 movies with Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez. Worked a lot with the Brat Pack back in the day. Very prolific producer. He knew I was a Mets fan. He calls me up. Again, I see him calling me. Hadn't spoken to him in a while. We were friends. Just the thing where sometimes you just don't talk to people after a while for no apparent reason, and no bad blood. Just we hadn't spoken. He calls me up. I'm wondering why he's calling me, and he says to me, "Hey Joe, I have your dream project." So I'm thinking, in Hollywood, when somebody says that, you got to wonder, where's this going, right? What kind of BS am I going to get now? He said the 62 Mets. I'm thinking, okay. He's like, I got the rights to Breslin's book. I'm like, oh.
Jimmy, so for audience members that don't know, and again, 20-somethings who might not know, Jimmy Breslin was one of the premier sports writers. And actually, he wrote all sorts of stuff, not only sports, right? He was a very controversial writer. Google him, and you'll see a lot of great stuff that, he was a real New York working class kind of writer.
Pulitzer Prize winner, was there's a street named after him in Midtown on 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. Was I mean, this is a little creepy, but he was the son of Sam. David Berkowitz was sending him letters
That's
before
right.
before he was caught. So he's really ingrained in New York. Jimmy Breslin wrote a book called "Can Anybody Here Play This Game?" which was a quote of Casey Stengel about the 1962 Mets. And Brad said, "I got the rights to Breslin's book. I want you to write the script." At this point, obviously, there's no way on earth I'm going to say no to this. Before I even hear about what the money's going to be, I couldn't. There's no way. I mean, I said yes on the spot. And I think when we got off the phone, I thought to myself, I don't know if we got to. I got to see. I got to come up with something to make this appealing to non-baseball fans. And I can't obviously give much away because the movie's going to shoot soon. But let's just say it's more than a baseball movie. It's about the healing of New York in the wake of the Giants and Dodgers leaving for California. And there's some fictitious things that I put into the script and veered away from Jimmy Breslin's book so that when people see this movie, you don't have to be a Mets fan. You don't have to be a baseball fan. So that's why everyone's excited about this movie. It's going to be a big movie, a big sweeping kind of epic in a lot of ways. So we're excited. Ed O'Neill is going to play Casey Stengel.
I was just going to ask you if you're at liberty to talk about the cast a little bit.
We'll talk about, Ed is the main one we could talk about today. Ed O'Neill is playing I could talk about it more in the near future, but Ed is going to play Casey Stengel. And which is really great. Ed is a big sports fan. If you see pictures of they kind of have the same face. Casey's not an easy character where any actor could just step in there, and like the idea of putting prosthetics on an actor and making him look like Casey. So I'm looking at Al, and I'm thinking of Al because Ed was obviously Al Bundy, but he's a good fit as Casey. So that's a project I'm obviously very, very excited about. It's going to be directed by Matthew Penn, who is the son of the late legendary director Arthur Penn, who directed Bonnie and Clyde. And Matt's an Emmy-nominated director, has directed every major TV show imaginable, NYPD. But actually, back to The Sopranos. Matt directed an episode of The Sopranos in the first season. So he directed that show before it ever aired, which is kind of a unique challenge when you're dealing with characters on a show before they were famous characters. So he directed an episode from season 1. So he's going to do a great job. Cinematographer John Lindley, who shot Field of Dreams, so he brings the pedigree of having done a baseball movie. It's going to be a very, very exciting movie, and it's going to shoot in 2021, and it'll be released in 2022 on the 60th anniversary of the Mets.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So I'll come back on, obviously, when we're in production. I'd love to come back on the show.
That'd be great. Absolutely. I mean, being from Baltimore, Clayton really can't stand having to hear anything about the Mets, especially the 1969 Mets.
Right.
Well, thankfully that is before my time. But Joe, before you get into production, I feel like it's important for me to mention at this time that I myself am half Italian. So I notice you like to cast Italian people in your movies. So if there happens to be a part in a baseball movie for another person who doesn't have an Italian last name but happens to be half Italian, please keep me in mind for that. Nothing wrong with pitching, right, Al?
Oh, let me tell you, Joe. His grandmother, Mama Rose, is it? What was your
Mama Jean.
Rose?
Mama Jean.
Mama Jean, man, she made some great meatballs. I mean, the whole family would gather to have that stuff. Oh, my goodness. Mom, I heard so many Mama Jean stories in the car on the way to Atlantic City or on a plane ride to Vegas. Clayton is a world-renowned poker player who's gone very deep. He's gone very deep 2 years running in the World Series of Poker. Had a major score 2 years ago, I believe, and I'll be interviewing him on another episode one of these days, and talking about his dual career as a comedian and a poker pro. But so all of this leads to and I'm looking forward to watching that. But then we come up to the Al Martin chapter of Joe's life. So tell
Yeah,
us a
let me
little bit
ask.
about that.
Yeah, let
That's
me jump
Clayton.
in here, Al. Joe, I wanted to ask you because it sounds to me like Maxine introduced you to Al, and then maybe you got your hands on a copy of Al's book. And so, what was it about the book that made you think it would make a good screenplay?
I think, yeah. So Al and I, just real quick, Al and I had met. Maxine and I, before we were married, had a Sunday afternoon lunch with Al and his lovely wife Caroline in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. That's when I met Al in person for the first time, and then he was at my wedding. So those are the only two times I actually met Al in person. Al's story, it went beyond the book to me. It was time when the book just happened to be where he was starting to tell the world about his rise, where he came from, and his innovations in the comedy club world. So for me, if he had never written the book, the book to me is not even what drove me to think it could be a good story. It was just what I had heard, even anecdotally, from Maxine about Al. I had been around him again, like I said. I mean, at the wedding, I barely remember speaking. I mean, it was my wedding day. I mean, who remembers speaking to anyone that day? That, the day's a blur. But when we had lunch that day, I just kind of thought there was a innate kind of real, Al's a character, obviously. He's a unique personality. He's very honest in who he is, and I found that very refreshing. So Maxine has told me a lot of stories about Al, anecdotal stuff that I always thought in the back of my mind that this was a story that needed to be told cinematically, because really his rise and where he came from, and that's really can be said of all of us, of course. But everyone, obviously, you guys all know Al's beginnings, and I found it appealing that Al is, to reference Rocky again, Al is kind of like Rocky Balboa. He's kind of this underdog guy who, no one, including Al, thought when he was a young man that he would ever become the king of the New York comedy club scene. That alone, to me, is this, again, to use the word, not to overuse the word epic, but that's what makes Al's story epic. So I said to Maxine, I think this Al story could be a movie. She's like, really? She's like, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? It's not a movie. I'm like, she didn't say it. So Al and I spoke. I said, look, I can really do this and make this something that's, of course, funny. I mean, you can't make a movie about somebody who is in the world of comedy and not have a funny movie. But where just who Al was, and again, where he came from, I thought it lent itself to be hysterically funny, but also have a real a heart and soul to the story, but also a relatability to people who are not in the comedy world. Again, it brings us back to the Mets movie. You want to make a movie that is going to appeal to people that know nothing about the comedy world. Okay, that's because otherwise you're just not. You can't just rely on.
Well, Rocky. Yeah, I mean, Rocky appealed to people,
right.
whether you like boxing or not. Rocky
Right.
appealed to all sorts of people.
Exactly. That's right. And you have to do that. And so Al's story, I felt the human side of who he was is going to appeal to a lot of people. I will say we're not going to give away a lot because we're still in the development stages here, but it's going to be hysterical. There will be actors of significance, I believe, this is just a prediction, lining up to play Al. Because the character I created is, it's Al, and he and I have had multiple very lengthy FaceTime chats of just him telling things to me that are not in the book, that he's probably never told publicly. And the character that I've created, who of course obviously is mostly who Al really is, but also we have to always take poetic license to make something, into a movie. I think that the role is built for a movie star, and not just somebody who's known for comedy. There's a lot of tenderness in this character, in who he is and how he relates to his family. and things like that. So yeah, so Al's story, to me, I'm very excited about this. It's really one of these things where I said, I got to keep my train rolling, it starts, I have to take care of me first, obviously. So it's about me, if I would have said, I just wrote the movie about the 62 Mets, that's going to be this huge movie. I don't want to do something to take me backwards. So this was the logical next step. And that's why I'm very excited about this thing, and I can't wait for it to get out there and we move it forward.
Flattered. I'm totally flattered that a man on an upward, and it's funny, the name of your company is Trajectory Films.
Correct.
But a man on an upward trajectory has seen fit to see my story and feel that it could be the next step in his career.
I couldn't agree more, Al. I mean, and also, if you look at Joe's last name in Italian, it means blessing, benediction.
Right.
So,
correct.
And you know what's interesting? My legal last name in Hebrew means blessing.
Yeah. So
okay.
It's two blessings coming together. And you might notice, those who listen to this podcast regularly will know this. Every time I introduce Al, I always use a word. You use word like epic and other words that you don't normally throw around. I never introduce Al without using the word legendary, because
Correct.
to me, Al is legendary. I mean, he is a larger than life character. There have been, over the years, we've had different people contact Al about possibly doing a reality show based on his life. But for me, like, would you rather watch Keeping Up with Al Martin, or would you rather watch a real movie based on the book of his life story? And, I think that these things that you picked up on, they really do shine through in the book. And if anyone listening hasn't gotten a copy of Al's book yet, it's called Did It on a Dare. You want to go to Amazon as soon as you can and pick up your copy, because it's an incredible story of, to me, like Rocky, an absolute underdog who overcomes unbelievable odds and has tremendous success. So yeah, Al is a legend, and he's very inspirational. And I agree that you will have a lot of interest from larger than life Hollywood actors wanting to play this role.
Yeah. And also just not just an underdog who made it, but he also, and again, people should buy his book, and Al's probably the first to tell you this, but he was an innovator in many things in the comedy club world that have been in place across the entire country, started with him. And we'll see that again. We're not going to give away stuff, but that's all going to be in the movie. And it's going to be, the other thing too is, just as a movie fan, and I'm not going to vent here, but this is just me, but, in this, we're 20 years now, 21 years almost into this new century. And there haven't been a lot of great comedy films anymore. When I was a kid, there'd be 2 or 3 films coming out every week that we couldn't wait to see as kids. Great comedy films, the Caddyshacks of the world, Animal House, all these great comedies. And today, those movies are few and far between. And this movie gets back to that from page 1, I might add, in the screenplay. And the movie will open just where people will be pulled right into who this guy is and root for him from the beginning. And it's going to be fun, and obviously Al will be talking about it as we go through this process. And it'll be really fun also for your audience and anyone who's a fan of Al and anyone who knows Al, that, you'll see this whole project unfold before your eyes in the very near future.
I'm looking forward to it. It's really an exciting, and I'm so glad I held out and didn't do reality TV.
Yeah.
Movie stars, we don't affiliate.
Yeah,
with
and I remember
reality
telling you
TV.
back then, Al. Yeah, and
Clayton.
and I remember telling you back then, Al, when things didn't work out with that, and you were a little bit disappointed. And I said, Al, it just might be that something even better, maybe a lot better, is actually on the horizon. So, maybe this is the blessing.
Blessing in disguise.
That was in disguise, all along. He beat me to the punch. All right, well, we're almost out of time. Al, is there anything that you wanted to ask Joe about before we let him go?
No, I mean, I've just gotten to know Joe, and 16 or 17 film awards that he's had in his great career, and I'm just honored to be working with him on this new project.
Joe, is there anything you would like to mention to our audience before we say goodbye?
I also just although I'm a writer, screenwriter first, a director, screenwriter. I actually produced a movie that I didn't write and direct called Slapface, and it's going to come out. It's been completed. It's going to be distributed in 2021. A movie called Slapface, which your audience should look for. And I'm not a guy who makes horror films. It's a horror film, but on a different level. It was written, directed by a guy named Jeremiah Kipp. And the guy who's in it that you might know is, you remember Dan Hedaya from The Usual Suspects?
Yes, I love him.
You know, remember from Cheers? He was Nick Tortelli on Cheers.
Yeah,
he plays the
always
sheriff.
like a hard-edged guy.
Hard-edged guy. Been in legendary movies. He's in it. He plays a small-town sheriff who's over the hill.
He was also in The Sopranos, I believe, wasn't he?
Dan?
Yes. Yeah.
Was he?
I think character that was like he was dating Tony Soprano's sister for a while.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So this
Check
movie
it out.
All right,
the IMDb, whatever.
Yeah. So Slapface will be out in 2021. I'm just a producer on this. I didn't write and direct it, but that's a movie to look for. And I'll come on. If you guys will have me, I'd love to come on at some point down the road in the new year and talk about Al's movie. But I just want to thank you, both of you, Al and Clayton, for having me on today. It was a huge honor, and
thank you.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of you guys.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us. It was an amazing, insightful interview. I'm just more excited than ever about Al's, legendary status, improving first the book, then the movie. And so it really is a great pleasure to get to know you a little bit, Joe. And so for Joe Benedetto and for Al Martin and for, of course, our wonderful producer behind the scenes, Jay Frank, doing a great job as always. I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you all so much for listening.
Hi, Al Martin here, owner of the Broadway Comedy Club and Greenwich Village Comedy Club in New York City. And I just authored a great book on stand-up comedy and my 30-year journey called Did It on a Dare, How I Built a Comedy Empire in 30 Short Years. So if you want an interesting story on the comedy scene in the 90s and early 2000s up until the present, if you're an aspiring comic and want to learn about some of my golden rules of comedy from a comedy club owner, this is the book for you. It's available on Amazon, and just go to Amazon, click Al Martin, and it'll take you right to my page. It's available on audio and Kindle as well as paperback. Thank you.